watch it. All right, but without further ado, Professor Schneider, Mr. and Mrs. Schneider, the floor is yours.
She's a professor too, so, and a doctor.
My students call me Dr. B, because butyrane is a little hard to pronounce. But when Ed told me that he was speaking about this subject, I got excited because part of the mindfulness research, I just came from an hour-and-a-half mindfulness science research steering committee at USC. There are a lot of grants. Many researchers are measuring the benefits of mindfulness and on health benefits. And in fact, Richard Davison has shown that continuous meditation will slow down the epigenetic expression of aging. And he can actually measure telomeres, little caplets on the isomers. But what I wanted to say was that one of the key findings is for people that are 70s and 80s, meaning and purpose is what really makes a difference for their health and well-being. And my husband has so much meaning and purpose. You'll hear about his values and dedication, but I love that he embodies this excitement and passion for learning, his curiosity and problem solving, but also this desire to keep the gifts circulating. So I've watched over the last 33 years, because I was teaching at the Gero School before I even met him. And there's like a tree, and all the people he's trained, you know, they've branched off and gone into many fields of aging, but it's a very rich network. And in this book that I just addressed on This Chair Rocks on Ageism, so many of the people that are quoted, Robert Butler, pioneers in the field, or my husband's peers. And there are people that, like Dr. Schneider, had a vision that things could be different. And just as we've addressed feminism, and we're addressing racism and ableism, sexism, we definitely need to address ageism. It's such a part of the culture. So great to have role models. He's a peer of Tony Fauci, and it's been exciting to see somebody that he's known for many decades be on the national landscape and be such a leader and have that integrity. So it'll be, I'm sure I could talk about him for a long time, but I just want to say, as an in-house critic, he's always growing, and I really respect that. So I wish you all the best in your studies, and have a great time with Dr. Schneider.
Which leads me into the first part of what matters to me, which is family. And that is the most important thing, is your family. So never lose sight of that. So how do you want me to do this, Jesse? You want me to answer questions? You just want me to talk?
I mean, you know, you could take like 15 to however long, 30 minutes, just speaking about your life, what matters to you, you know, what you've done that was significant to you. And then we'll take either like the last 30 minutes or last few minutes just to answer questions. But I'm looking to end it around 12:50 because I know people probably have class to get to and stuff.
Okay, so family matters to me. The other thing that matters is following your heart, okay? You should do something where you follow your heart, what you believe in, okay? Not what pays you more, but always follow your heart. I have never, ever taken a job for money, and I've done very, very well. I have no problems with money now, but I've never went someplace because they offered me more money. Warren Bennis, a USC professor, a friend of mine, who wrote the books on leadership, said that managers do things right, but leaders do the right thing. So I've always tried to do the right thing. And I'll go and discuss that in many ways. But I thought maybe before I go into that, you may ask, how did I get into the field of aging? How did I become a gerontologist? And I'll tell you the story. And my wife gave away the punchline, but I'll tell you the story anyway. My grandfather I got a call from my mother that my grandfather was having heart failure. And so I told my mother what to do and to bring her to the emergency room at the New York hospital where I was an intern. And I would take care of him. I was in the emergency room at that point, taking care of patients. He came to the emergency room. I took care of him, made him better, and sent him upstairs to the ward. Because when someone comes in with heart failure, you have to worry that maybe they had a heart attack that caused them to have heart failure. So you admit them for at least 24 hours. So I admitted him upstairs to the teaching ward of the New York hospital. What could be safer? This is Cornell University, New York hospital, second best university in the United States, maybe the world. He's safe, right? I go upstairs when I get off of duty 3 or 4 hours later, and there's my grandfather laying flat in bed, which he should never have been after heart failure, and delirious, and restrained, with restraints on his arm. So I went to see the intern who was in charge, whose name was Tony Fauci, who was a good friend of mine and was on charge that day. And I said, Tony, what have you done to my grandfather? And he said, Ed, he came upstairs and he was at risk of a heart attack, so we put him on strict bed rest. In those days, you would do that, put him in bed for 2 weeks. You wouldn't let him leave the bed. And so my grandfather had to go to the bathroom. So they gave him a urinal. My grandfather was not going to pee in a urinal. And so he started to walk to the bathroom, and they grabbed him, they put him down, and they gave him phenobarbital. We now know that phenobarbital is a drug that can make older people get hyperstimulated. So my grandfather became even more stimulated and more wanting to leave his bed. So they decided they would restrain him and give him Valium. Valium is a terrible drug for seniors, just like phenobarbital. So when I got up there, he was restrained, delirious, and Tony and I sat down and said, what are we going to do with my grandfather? And we decided to do what? This is how I teach. I teach interactively. What were we going to do with my grandfather? Anyone?
Get him up.
Get him up, and what else?
Send him home.
Send him home, get him out. So we signed him out against medical advice, which is called AMA. We signed him out. He went home, never was in a hospital again, died in bed. Okay. So that convinced me that we had to do something about old people who were treated so badly in hospitals. And I dedicated myself to a career in trying to help older people. And that was 1967. I'm sure how long I've been involved in this, okay? Now I said you have to do things right, right? That includes outside of your work. When I was doing my training, the Vietnamese War was on. And I decided this was not a just war. People were dying and there was no good reason they were dying. So I joined the anti-war movement and I wound up heading all the doctors and nurses in the mass march, the million-person march on Washington in 1970. So if you, there's a Netflix show right now on the Chicago 7. If you watch it, you'll see all the people that I interacted with. The Black Panthers and David Dillinger and all those folks, Rennie Davis, et cetera. So do the right thing even outside your job. And then as dean, I had a choice. I had a provost who decided that we don't need a school of gerontology. It'll fit in fine in the college. And so he pressured me to move the school into the college. And I could have stayed, I was dean for 18 years. I could have stayed for another 18 years. But I said, no way, it's not a good idea. And I fought and I eventually won. Because as you know, the school is not in the college. We have our own school, but I had to fight a very hard fight. And not all the faculty were on my side either. And most unfortunate to say that, but they were not. Let me just get, okay, so doing the right thing is much more important than just doing the right thing in your profession. It's doing it to help the school. It's doing it to fight the Vietnamese War. The next thing I want to talk about is adversity. You're going to go out there in life and you're going to have a tremendous setback. I had 3 major setbacks. And Warren Bennis in his book points out that great leaders have setbacks, and that's the test of your mettle. It's easier to ride over a wave of everybody saying you're doing a wonderful job and praising you. So 18 years as dean, the first 18 years, everybody thought I was doing a great job. And then when I fought with the provost, they all sort of backed away from me. But I knew I had to do the right thing. So when you're facing adversity, do the right thing. Very, very important, okay? And to show you the outcome of this, I saved the school, and one of our donors, whose father founded the school, Leonard Davis's son, decided to thank me for what I did and created a chair in my name. So not all good fights are unrewarded, okay? The next thing that's important is an outside life. You can't just be work, 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 work. So for a good part of my life, I raced sailboats. I love racing sailboats. I was racing sailboats for the U.S. Naval Academy. I was their offshore coach. So I'd work in my laboratory, finish my work, and go to Annapolis and race sailboats. So don't just work, work, work. Get some outside activities, okay? The next thing I want to talk about is giving back. Life has been good to me, so I wanted to give back. And so I'm on the board of the Los Angeles Jewish Home. I'm on several boards trying to help the Jewish Home in its programs because I was raised Jewish and I want to give back to the Jewish community. The last thing I wanted to talk about before questions is the need to rejuvenate yourself. Don't ever become stale. So every 5 or 10 years, I do something totally different. 20 years ago, working with someone called Maria Henke, we created the first online distance learning program in the United States, well, in the Western United States of America. Okay? And what did the faculty think of when Maria and I started it? What was their response? Anyone?
Pushback?
Huh?
A lot of pushback?
Pushback. They didn't want to do this. It was more work for them, and they feared being replaced by digital courses. And this is something totally foreign to them. They didn't want to do it. So what did I do? Did I give up?
No.
Jessica, you're smiling?
You did it.
I did, but how did I do it? Every faculty member was opposed to it. I actually love fundraising and raised about $100 million for the school, including $10 million in scholarship aid for students. So when I faced this problem, I called up my friends at ARP and I said, could you send me $1 million? Which they did. And when I got the $1 million, I walked into faculty offices and said, would you consider, remember, I'm a dean, but faculty don't care that I'm a dean. I'm there just because they're too smart to be a dean, okay? So the faculty would say, I really don't want to do it. When I say to them, okay, how about if I gave you $25,000 and you created a course for me? Guess what happened? All of a sudden we had a dozen online courses and we had a curriculum. Okay, so that's how online learning started. And I do love fundraising. When I came to USC, the other dean said, oh my God, Ed, you're gonna have to go out there and ask people for money. It's a terrible thing to do. And that's ridiculous. It's a great thing to do because with that money, you can do great things. Like student scholarships, so you can actually help students go to USC. That's not so bad. Okay, so that's a little bit about myself, rejuvenated myself. I started a new course, the leadership course, Gero 589. The course before that was Professional Issues in Gerontology. You've never seen a duller course. It would have put you to sleep every single session, okay? So I said, I can't do this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a course on leadership. So how do you teach leadership? So what I did, besides the book on leadership, was to bring leaders into the classrooms. Every week, there's another leader or 2 or 3 or 4. So a question for you guys. How do you start a course on leadership? How do you get leaders to come to the classroom? CEOs of huge companies, billion-dollar companies. How do you do that? Anyone who's been in Gero 589 can't answer because I already told you. But how did I do it? Anyone? Take a guess? Lu Yang, unmute yourself.
Okay. How did you get those CEOs to our class?
Yes.
Okay. I think some of them, like you were friends, and also some of them were students in USC.
Yes, but that's not how I had to get one CEO to come to the classroom. And so what I did, Leon, is I called a cold call to Patricia Will. She wasn't my friend then. I did a cold call. I said, Patricia, would you consider coming to my classroom? And she said yes. And after that, I called up all the other CEOs and I said, Patricia Will, the CEO of Belmont's coming to my class. Will you come? So it all started, Leanne, with a cold call, okay? And then she became my friend. They all became my friends because they have a lot of fun with me and they have a lot of fun in class. Okay, so I've spoken for about 15, 20 minutes. Jessica, let's answer some questions. Oh, by the way, the other thing I'm doing that's, again, I told you about rejuvenating myself. I started a new company 4 months ago with 2 techies.
You just answered my question. I was going to say, what was the most recent thing that you did to rejuvenate yourself? But wait, so you started can you tell us more about that company?
The company is called Balance. It's a company to deliver virtual fitness and mindfulness to seniors who are now in their homes isolated.
So you said, is it a virtual delivery of fitness, or is it actually like a physical therapist that comes?
No, we have trainers. We have 6 trainers, and we have the world's expert in mindfulness, my wife, and we have sessions each day. Today I did one of the sessions myself. I did dance therapy. So I was dancing to all kinds of Motown music. Exactly. Luliana's doing it. Exactly, just like that.
That's really
What was
cool.
the inspiration behind it?
Behind what happened was the 2 techies each had grandmothers who were isolated in apartments. And one of them decided to train her grandmother, and she did virtual training of her grandmother in her apartment. So she thought, hey, why don't we start a company? So she found a friend of hers, and the 2 of them started this company, and they called me up and they said, Ed, they knew me through, one of them I've been friends with for about 15 years. She said, Ed, we want you to be a consultant. We'll pay you to help our company get going. And what did I say?
Yes.
No, I said no. So what did I say? Giovanna, what did I say?
You started your own? I'm not sure.
Nope. Sarah?
The answer for that. So you decided to get yourself involved with the company and be a board member.
Correct. I said, no, I won't be a consultant. I'll be a founder. So I'm a co-founder of the company called Balance. And if you want to see it, just go to hellobalance.com and you'll see our website. Okay?
Here's a question, Dr. Schneider. Like, before you decided to become a boarder, have you ever got involved in that kind of classes before you decide to become a boarder?
Become a?
Boarder, become a co-founder of that company.
And how did I decide?
Yeah, like before you decide to become the co-founder.
Well, they just called me up on a phone call and said to me they wanted me as a consultant, and I said no.
Yeah, but like, have you ever have you ever tried those classes before you set up your mind?
I had founded a company about 20 years ago, which did not succeed because it was ahead of its time to develop products for aging. But when they called me up, I thought it was a great idea and I wanted to be involved. And that's why I asked to be a founder.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Everyone, feel free to ask any questions that you may have. But when did you, going back to I think the reason why I'm like targeting this rejuvenating part that you spoke about is because I'm kind of going through that process of wanting to do something new for myself and, you know, find a new hobby. So when did that kind of, when did you set that kind of rule or goal in your life?
I don't think I ever sent it as a rule per se. I just was aware that if something was boring or dull or some pattern, I would try to change it. So for example, in medical school, the first 2 years were boring for me. And so I decided that I would do something different. I went to the Charles River in Boston, and there's the Charles Sailing Club, and they taught you how to sail. So I learned how to sail. And that became my passion while I was a medical student in Boston. And then I'll tell you, there was another medical student who was floundering. He could not understand biochemistry, but he was the classics valedictorian at Harvard, which means they have 2 valedictorians, one for grades and one who does the best in classics. and he was the classic valedictorian. And I said to him, Peter, I will teach you biochemistry if you teach me classics. And so during medical school, I learned, because I hadn't learned that in college, teach me the classics. And so I learned Roman and Greek history while I was in medical school. So it's not like every 5 years the alarm goes off and I say I want to do something different. I just keep looking for opportunities for that. So let me tell you how the distance learning, how we did online distance learning, why we're Zooming now, because we have been the pioneers. The head of the School of Cinema, who is a dear friend of mine, Liz Daly, came into my office 23 years ago. And she said, Ed, let's do distance learning at USC. If cinema and gerontology, which are the two best units at USC, can do it, then all the university can do it. So she went off and she spent a lot of money developing DVDs. I couldn't afford DVDs. So I said, let's do it on the internet. Now, at that point, I didn't even get email. I didn't know very much about the internet at all. So I went and I hired a couple of techies and nothing happened. Nothing got done. So then I knew about Maria and how she can get things done. So I said, Maria, let's do it, you and me. And boom, it got done. And that's how it became. And does anyone want to know the first online distance learning course, who we taught it to? The board of AARP. And why we did that is because they gave us the money for online learning.
What was the first class you guys, like the very first course that was? Sorry. No, good.
The very first course was Gero 510.
Gero 510, wow.
And it was entirely online. It was not Zoomed, or there was no video component. It was online class with lots of interaction. Because that's the other thing I believe in. For those of you who've taken my class, I like to be interactive. I think teaching otherwise is boring. And that's why fundraising is so much fun for me, because I don't just go out for lunch and then wait for the moment to ask them the money. I am fun. I learned about these folks. I've got incredible friends from fundraising. One of my dear friends is Meyer Luskin, who is 95 years old. He gave $100 million to UCLA to fund the Luskin School of Public Policy and their wonderful convention center. And he's a treat. We correspond back and forth. I send him cartoon stuff and he sends me cartoon stuff.
At Schneider, I have a question for you. When did you actually started fundraising for the first time? Did you take a course, or you just along the way experiences and just meeting new people?
So when I came to USC and met the other deans, they said, oh, Ed, you're going to have to ask people for money. It's terrible. We hate fundraising. And even worse, we hate going to football games. They didn't realize that even before I came to USC, I loved USC football. And fundraising, all fundraising is about people, people to people. So the first time I went out to fundraise, I had never done that before here at USC. I went out for lunch with this gentleman. His name was Eichenbaum. And John Pinos asked me if I could raise some money for his Aging at Home program. So I went out there, talked to him about aging at home. He said, Ed, I'm not interested at all in aging at home. My wife has Alzheimer's disease. I'll give you $100,000 for Alzheimer's research. Now, the interesting part of that whole lunch was he went back later and told a friend that I was a great conversationalist. I didn't talk, but maybe 1% of the entire lunch. I asked him about his family, his grandchildren, how he met his wife, how he got into his occupation, what the challenges are for him at work, what he liked to do. I spent the whole time asking him questions about himself. And his response was, I was a tremendous conversationalist, and he gave me the money I asked for. So It's all about people feeling good about you. People give money to people they like. They don't give people money, money to people they don't like. That's the key to fundraising. So as I said, I raised about 100 million. A lot of it's due to my wife, Leah. You've met her. She's incredibly charming. She's an incredible people person. She's better than I am in many ways at fundraising. If she ever wanted to do it, she'd be the world's champion fundraiser. So I'm fortunate to have Leah as a wife, and I'm fortunate that we like doing it.
I have to know, on the topic of your wife, how did you guys meet? You guys hinted at it a little bit in the beginning.
You're gonna love this one. We met at a gerontology meeting. How did that happen? I'm working at the National Institute on Aging in Washington as deputy director. The Secretary of Health and Human Services asked the director to go to the American Society on Aging meeting because they were having a symposium on health promotion and disease prevention. So my boss, the director, was going to this ASA meeting. I never went to ASA, I went to GSA. So at the last minute, my boss had to do something else. And he calls me in his office and said, Ed, you have to go to ASA for me. So I bought the ticket to San Francisco, went to ASA and had a great time there. And Saturday night was the dance night. So I love to dance. And when I was at the dance night, I went over to see Fernando Torres Hill. Does everybody know Fernando? Good. Well, Fernando's always surrounded by beautiful women, always. So as a bachelor, I went over to see Fernando. And that night, there was a beautiful woman sitting with Fernando called Leah Buterin. And so I asked for her card and promptly lost it, but knew that I could find out her name through Fernando and called her back a few weeks later. Meanwhile, Leah goes upstairs to see her mother, who came out to San Francisco with her, and she told her mother that she met this guy, but he was much too old for her. So that's how I met my wife at the American Society for Aging meeting in 1986 in San Francisco at the St. Francis Hotel. And the rest is history. Leah loves that story, I can tell. Yes.
Dr. Schneider?
Yes, Leslie.
I feel you have that luck, like when you want to do something and on the way you looking for it, you'll find the helper or some, like the God will send angels to you, I feel.
Well, no, I don't think God will send angels to you if you don't look. So for example, remember, I hire a techie to do the distance learning program, internet-based distance learning. He decides that he wants to be with the band. He's one of these guys who leads the band around. I see him with the band, I don't see him doing any work. And so I said, I've got to get it done. And so here, if you're developing something tech, you'd look for somebody tech. Well, Maria's not a tech person, but she knows how to keep tech people working at a task. So again, think out of the box. Don't think, got to find a tech person, got to find a tech person. Find someone to help you get the work done. And things don't drop on your head. There is serendipity. My life is serendipitous, okay? There are lots of times where I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. But if you don't know what to do with that serendipity, you won't be able to achieve your life goals. And the field of aging, when I got into it in 1972, was very different. When I told people I was going into gerontology, they thought I was throwing away my career. Here I had been top training program with Tony Fauci at Cornell. I'd gone to the NIH with Tony Fauci and did my training at the NIH. I was off for a great career in scientific medicine, okay? Academic medicine. And then I'm throwing it away, going into gerontology. Nobody went into gerontology in those days, from a medical background like me. But I did it because, well, you want another story? I'll hear another story about gerontology, how I got into the field. So my grandfather was one, but I didn't think there was a field. one day I go to a meeting, not one day, I went to a meeting on aging in Santa Cruz. And I'm listening to the speakers talk about the causes of aging. One says it's due to genes. One says it's due to environment. One says it's due to cross-linking with no data. So I turned to the gentleman next to me and I said, I can't go into this field. There's no science. And he turns to me and he says, that's exactly why you should go into this field, because you could do something really special in this field. His name was Alex Comfort, this gentleman. He was the founder of gerontology in England. Okay. And he also wrote a book. He was also a Renaissance person. He wrote a book called The Joy of Sex, which sold 3 million copies. Best-selling author.
Are you still in touch with this man?
Alex died, unfortunately. He passed away, but he was a great pioneer. He wrote the book, The Joy of Sex, nothing to do with aging. He wrote it because he was going bankrupt, because he couldn't afford to live on English salary. And so he wrote that book. It was the first book that came out that actually showed sex in a positive way. Okay, so I've had a tremendous amount of fun in my career. I did work with Bob Butler and the great pioneers in the field of aging. That's why I have so much fun in Gero 589, bringing people like Bill Thomas to my class. Bill's another great pioneer. So I love people like that, do things differently. And Bill's, again, he's fighting a tough battle. He wants to do the right thing, but right now it's really hard the establishment won't let him do it. You'd think that all these chains would say, hey, we will make a name for ourselves by doing things right and doing things the way Bill Thomas wants to do it. But they don't. So you want my Tony Fauci stories?
I actually have one more question.
Sure.
Do you ever I love to ask this question, but do you ever look back and wish you could change something that you did, or you wish you could have done something at a certain time?
I have been so lucky in my life. I have no regrets of anything that I've done, any career things that I've made, any changes that I've made. Give you an example. I went to Denver to head up an institute on aging there in 1980. And I did my best. But the people who hired me lied to me, and the people there, again, just did everything wrong. And so after 7 months there, I picked up everything and went back to Washington again. And so what happened, I lost my job at the bench. I was a bench scientist. I was extremely productive research scientist at the bench. And my boss was so jealous of me, he wouldn't let me back in the building. So I'm stuck here. Job in Denver didn't work out. Came back to the NIH. What am I going to do? Fortunately, my boss at the NIH was Bob Butler. And he said, Ed, I want to get research on biomedical research going at the NIA. And so I started the program in biomedical research at the NIA, started the Alzheimer's disease program, started the geriatric medicine program, started the teaching nursing home program. So even though I didn't have a laboratory, I was still doing research things. And that's another thing. Here, my career could have been thwarted. I was a bench scientist. I produced 18 papers one year, the most of any scientist at the NIH. And my boss said he didn't want me back in the building because I was making him look bad. So what do you do? Is that right? Should I file suit against him? No. What I did, I said, okay, I'll work with Bob Butler. I'll put my energies into something I've never done before in my life and develop a research program. Okay? But that's the story of my life. You meet a barrier, you figure a way to make it good again. I mean,
Where do you see gerontology in the next 5 to 10 years? What are your predictions?
oh my God, you could not have chosen a better field. When I was the dean my first few years, I was saying, I hope my students will get jobs. People out there did not know what gerontology meant. I got letters to the Dean of Gerontology at USC. It was so difficult. You guys are benefits of a booming field of gerontology. What I love to see is people walk a different tune in long-term care. Out there is skilled nursing, assisted living, and retirement. Bill Thomas wants to break it down. You guys can do that for him. Get out there, create something new. I mean, there are students from China, and they ask, what can they do? There's such an opportunity there, such an incredible opportunity in China right now. I mean, the other thing I was involved in, talk about things change your life. I spent 15 years working on the PACE at the Jewish Home. 15 years trying to get the state of California and the US government to approve a PACE application. How long did it take us? 15 years. How big was the application? 3,000 pages.
What?
Before we could start the PACE program, we had to put $5 million in the bank. We had to fundraise $5 million. How did the Jewish Home do that? We found a donor, and someone had to show that donor how important PACE was. So somebody had to take this woman to various PACE programs in San Francisco, at Unlock, to San Diego, at St. Thomas, whatever it is down there, and show her how good, that was me. So we got the $5 million, and today there's a PACE program at the Jewish Home serving 200 people, and it's expanding. But again, that's another example. Something totally, was I ever involved in PACE? Was I ever involved in HMOs? No, nothing. It was totally new to me.
You're a natural.
Well, not necessarily natural. I just love challenges, put your energy behind it, and you can do just about anything.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, wants another story? I have lots of stories, but yeah.
Question.
Emily, question.
Hello. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to let you know that I'm doing my internship at the SCAN Foundation, and I really wanted to thank you for bringing Erin in last year for the 589 class, because that was my introduction to the organization, and I'm really loving it. It's a really special experience. So
SCAN is wonderful. I'm glad you have that. And
thank you.
Erin is terrific.
Yeah, I'm liking it. I'm my preceptor's Callie, but I'm working with Erin as well a bit.
Callie is incredible. As much as I like Erin, say this, I like Callie better.
Callie is a machine. I've never worked with anyone like her. A very, very good role model.
Okay, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Great. And the graduates of our program, guys, they're all graduates of our program. Sorry, go ahead, Emily.
I was going to say my actual question. I just wanted to let you know about that. But my actual question, I love hearing your stories, but I've never actually heard about your experience with the March on Washington. I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit. That sounds like a really interesting thing to have experienced.
So I was against the war starting in 1967. Early on, I thought this was crazy to fight a war against people who really wanted to save their country and make it a nation. And all these crippled people were coming back. And it was very unpopular when I first started being against the war. The majority of Americans were for the war when I started. Finally, they started to get against the war. So we decided that we were going to march on Washington. This is the mobilization to end the war in Vietnam. The Black Panthers and about 5 other organizations, we got together and we're going to march on Washington. What was our challenge? Nixon was the president, and he was a law and order president. So we're marching 1 million people to Washington. What was our challenge? Our challenge was to keep it peaceful. We had the weathermen trying to disrupt it and make violence. If it was violent, then Nixon would have an excuse. You'd see all over the papers shooting and everything else, and he'd have an excuse for all these lawless people descending on Washington. So when we marched, we had hundreds of thousands of people linking arms along the march with orders that anyone became rowdy, that they would stop any violence whatsoever. Okay. So I was in charge of all the medical part of it. We had 1,000 doctors and nurses and all volunteers. And we had a church that we used as the headquarters. I drove around in a command vehicle with a Red Cross on it, and we made a red wrong turn one day, and we went into the back of the White House. And people came running out with guns pointing at us. I waved my Red Cross and everything was okay. But lots of, I'll tell you my experience, my one experience. I negotiated with the mayor of Washington to release any young people that were arrested and put in jails and were at great risk being in jails with felons. So I went to the jail in Washington to get out these young people who were arrested. There were hundreds. And the captain was sitting behind the desk, and I said, well, I have this letter here from the mayor to let out these young people. And he said to me, what did he say to me? This right-wing, sort of uptight, conservative guy said, get the hell out of here. So what did I do? Luyann, what did I do?
I don't know.
Anyone? Jessica?
You didn't get out.
No, I had to get out. The captain says, get the hell out of here. I'm not going to fight with him. I'd be in jail. I'd be right there down the. So I called the mayor's office and I said, this is what happened. And the mayor's office called the precinct. I went back there and the captain was gone. I let out over 100 young people. So you can make a difference. You really can make a difference. So hopefully I saved a lot of people from a very, very traumatic experience in Washington. And then I was there on the march from the Vietnamese embassy when the weathermen tried, oh, it was a lot of things going on. It was an amazing weekend. 1 million people descended on Washington. No one went homeless. People took them in all over the place. There were people, 100 people sleeping in the basement of the church where we were. Everyone took in people. It was marvelous. It was like, it was 60s. It was loving type of situation. It was wonderful. For food, I went out and bought $500 worth of food and then put a little canister at the end of the buffet. And by the end of the weekend, I had $1,800 there in the canister. And I gave the $1,300 to the church and kept $500. I didn't have that much money then. Okay, but those were the days. The 60s were great, 70s were great. So not only was I doing the right thing, but I was having a lot of fun. There were great concerts. There was Joan Baez on the Mall. There was Bobby Dylan, lots of fun things going on.
Dr. Schneider, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I'm at a loss for words for a lot of the stories that you said, but I love that your resilience, I love your wife's resilience as well. I know I'm probably going to be checking in with you for some office hours and hopefully on my master's program I could take your class, but thank you so, so much. Does anyone have any more questions for Dr. Schneider? So with that being said, thank you so much again, Dr. Schneider, for your time. And thank you, everyone. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Happy Monday.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Jessica. And see a whole bunch of you guys in class. Take care.
It was really nice to hear you speak. Good. Have a wonderful week.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schneider.
Thank you, Dr. Schneider and Jessica.
Finally, my friend Tony Fauci is not going to be picked on anymore by that.
Seriously, yes.
The rest of it. I was sending him.
Seriously.
Can I tell you one more story, Jessica, before we go? Tony Fauci story?
Go for it, yes.
So I remember 50 years ago when Tony Fauci used to go working out at Fort Meade. He's a workout freak. And the head of the Vietnamese army, the American army in Vietnam, General Westmoreland. And he saw Tony with his long hair and sideburns. And he said, son, you're out of uniform. What's your name, rank, and serial number? I'm going to report you to your commanding officer and get you fired. And he reported Tony to his commanding officer at the NIH, who did nothing. So when Trump talked about firing Tony, I sent him an email saying, I remember when. Have a great day, great week. Bye, guys.
That is awesome. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.